She's tired. Oh,
on group tonight. I see Rachel is on here again. What time is it for you? 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. Why are you up?
Yeah, I blame the caffeine I had this morning. Accept my rules.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to see you. But man, you need to life or something.
And I have no plans for this Sunday, so I can sleep in as long as I want.
There you go. There you go. Well, I didn't have much sleep last night, so I'm kind of running on empty. I spent the day. We have some sort of skin something going on with all the dogs.
Hmm.
Check for mange. It is not mange, but it acts a lot like it, almost identical. But there's no uh, sign of them. So I'm not sure what they got into environmentally or what, but I'm treating it as if it were Demodex mange. So lots of lots of baths and vacuuming constantly and treating the backyard and spraying Wondercide everywhere inside the house. So It smells like lemongrass in here, but not good everywhere. So
Oh, I'm sorry to hear.
yeah, it's a tough one, and I can't figure it out, and the vet can't figure it out, which is odd. And
Hmm.
so, but I think we're on the starting on the downhill side of it.
And
So
did all the dogs get it or just a few?
yes, yeah.
Oh, wow.
It manifested itself on Bella having obviously old and not having as good of an immune system as the others. So she was the worst and showed the worst, and that's why I thought it was mange because she had chewed on herself and it looked, the scabs and stuff kind of looked like
Hmm.
it, but it didn't test out to be that. So
Hmm.
I'm not sure, who knows what it is. There's a crazy lady, and I don't use that word loosely, next door. She probably has dementia. I don't think she's been out in her backyard in more than 6 years. She let the fence collapse. I had to build my own fence. It still collapsed years later. It is completely overgrown. I know there's rats back there, and the feral cats stay back there
Oh,
in the
wow.
neighborhood, right next door, of course. So there's no telling what's over there. So, I sprayed my yard and my fence with some stuff that I bought that treats the yard for anything.
Yeah.
Hopefully that cuts that. Uh, well, okay, we'll go ahead, guys. It's already what, 8 after. So uh, actually, since we've got obviously we've only got 3 or 4 questions, so it's not going to take us long. Sorry you had to get up at 2. But wanted to ask you guys, what are you getting out of this series of stuff? How many of these have you watched, and is this helping? So, Rachel, since you're on, I'm gonna ask you first.
Um, yeah, I was listening today to the last one, to the working dog thing. So my question would be, is there even a point where you would treat a working dog with a specific task, like a police dog or so? What is the point where you start to treat him differently? Because what I've got out of what you were describing, that's the same that you teach us in the classes about dealing with the pet dog, all the principles that you've mentioned. So
Yes.
now the question would be, at what point are you going to specify the task that this dog needs to fulfill?
Okay. Generally, if I'm getting to work with a puppy, which is what I prefer, young, I'll give the example of Bosch because he's the most, well, he isn't the most recent. Candy is the most recent that I'm currently working with to work with as a service animal. And she was about um, 3.5, maybe 4 months old at the most. And she already had some um, habits that we had to change. Just learning, as a puppy that was in an environment that wasn't conducive um, to that end purpose. She was just kind of non-directed and had gotten some habits that I guess most people would put up with. I'll put it that way as a normal Pack and I, obviously, and anyone else around her, I gave specific tasks and protocols to even my grandkids when they were around her. Play with her like a pet. You can do things that direct her to assist, help, do things like that. So as a puppy, I'm going to start, with Bosch. He was 5.5 weeks old when I first started working with that litter. And I was really studying them for about the first week or two. And so about at 7 weeks old is when I started um, looking at them in after a couple of evaluations, I started looking at them in a categorical way to say, okay, currently there's one that developmentally is a few weeks behind, probably 2 weeks behind at 7 weeks. And he continued to be, that dog continued to be behind the others, but would eventually catch up. But just really pet dog classification is what I would say. Or three at the top of all the evaluations, just, personality, uh, independent, not independence as in, um, I'm going to go do my own thing, independent of even their siblings to rather than follow the crowd, they went and female, the one that I thought at the time, if I was going to get a dog, that was one I was very interested in, and so because of that, just no fear whatsoever beyond the puppy um, understanding of what fear is. She had none. She just bolt ahead and do things, and I was very impressed with that. But Bosch and his brother, I believe Chase was his brother. They were always 1 and 2 in every other category, and Bosch was always kind of other than in size. Chase eventually they were neck and neck, but so at that point, about 7 weeks old, was when I was giving them direction because I recognized these three dogs and one just testing under those for intelligence and capabilities and physical actions and understanding, willingness to do things, engagement aspects with humans as well as other dogs. Just everything that I look at and test for. Easily, the top three could have gone to anybody to become a service or working dog. Fourth one with a good trainer that knows what they're doing to become a working or service dog. And so, say it, somewhere between 6 and 7 weeks old, if you had the puppies at that time, you would start directing activities they're going to need to do. And so, with Candy, she's about close to 7 months old now. And, what I'm teaching her with, actually, Carol and her husband are going to take her as a service animal. So we've been meeting, and this is the first time that we met with one of their dogs. We've just been meeting to get them used to each other and her recognize them as family, extended family, essentially. And so this was the first day that we went and met with one of their dogs. And it went about as perfectly as I could have wished. Their dog, their female, was absolutely incredibly perfect at giving the right signals at the right time to a puppy who was a little uncertain about the situation. And she act things at the right time to settle Candy down. And literally probably 3 minutes, then they were buddies and they just went off together. So, but I've been trying to, that point, ever since I've had her, because the reason I took her on was to develop the basics for her becoming a service animal, mobility assistance, essentially, in this case. So, what she would be. So, as soon as you possibly can, what you're doing is rather than you're using the same concepts and principles, but you're directing those activities, the physical, mental, the connections, all of those things towards what the end purpose of that dog will be. Knowing also you're going to have time off, except when you're needed. So the connections, the recall, just like what we did out there this morning. Just we sat down after they worked for about 45 minutes. We sat down in a covered area outside and dropped the leashes of both dogs, and they simply went back and forth between us. And so every time she would come on her own, we'd celebrate, open arms, et cetera, et cetera. And then turn her around and actually call her, give a signal to indicate to come back also when she'd go off on her own, and she'd instantly come back, celebrate, good girl, all that stuff. So you're constantly teaching things like connection and recall, all of that stuff. It's the way you put it together. So as far as what you do differently, it's more focused. And then you begin teaching them certain tasks. Like when she first got here, within a week, I was teaching her soft mouth of retrieval of objects and stuff. So take this, give it back, good girl. Take it, bring it to me a step, give it back, good girl. All of that stuff. So that's what you're doing just over and over again. Now, you keep in mind what that dog is going to be used for and what her purpose should end up being. If it doesn't match up for some reason, first you have to look at yourself and say, are you doing things right? Is this dog, it's not about, a lot of the times it's not about the dog. It's about, are you really capturing who that dog is and its interest in the right way and guiding that dog. And if you're not, don't force the dog to do those things that it doesn't understand the need or purpose or anything else. Find out what actually resonates and connects with that dog. That's what I'm constantly trying to do with all dogs. So does that answer your question a little bit?
Yes and no. So
I
would you
figured.
say that working dogs needs to be chosen as a puppy already? So meaning you cannot develop them after a year or so or 18 months and then see they will be suitable for some kind of work?
No, it depends on the dog. I mean, a friend of mine who was a former police officer here in Texas, and was a trainer and worked with dogs, and he'd go to um, animal shelters
Mhm.
and take dogs that people wanted to get rid of that were suitable and train them and help train, the small town departments that needed a handler and a dog. And that's what he did with his time after he retired. So certain dogs, certain mentalities, obviously, you're not going to take a Bichon Frise and make it into you know, a, um, a takedown dog, chasing some guy down and
Yeah.
knocking him down. So obviously it depends on the breed, and you're not going to take enough charka and make it a tracking trailing dog that eats the person when they get there.
Yeah.
So it needs to be within categories. Now it's much like, for high-end stuff, how can I describe this? There's certain basic elements that most dogs are capable of, right?
Hmm.
You know, obviously, trainers train heel all the time, right? And an auto sit and all the other things. So just about any dog can be trained to some standard there. And that's the beginning points of a lot of those things where, as a mobility assistance dog, I need you beside me. Okay. When I stop, you can either stand, or, which I prefer you doing, because I don't want you obedience trained. I want you trained for that job. So if I need to stand, if I need to sit, then you can sit or lay down, if I give a hand signal or whatever else. So those things, that's what you work with and for. There's a lot of times, people would ask, my dog is obedience trained. Can you help us, make it a service dog? Well, I would have to evaluate it, but you're really pushing the rock uphill. You need to start with at a different point in its development. Some dogs have zero training and they have capabilities. I was talking last night in class about a dog that I was hired to go to a facility a couple of facilities in West Virginia to help them with. They were um, dog daycare, boarding facility, training too, and all of that stuff. And there was one dog they handed me towards the end that they didn't tell me anything about it. They just went, it's one of those things. Well, let's give Nelson this dog, that type of thing. Everybody loves to do to me. It's like, okay. And I found out real quick when I walked through the door of the room, and there was another dog, a single dog in a single kennel by itself in that room. And we had to go through it to go out. And they both exploded to each other. And so I turned around, walked back out, and they said, yeah, that happens every time. Well, it would have been nice to know. So we didn't create that expectation. But so then I did my thing, and, in, 10 seconds, it was fine. We walked through without any reactions, and walked to the outside where I had already put up, outside, had put some scent locations that I showed him how to do a little bit of engagement, some nose work engagement with the dogs they had. Any of the dogs that came in, so that it engaged their nose, and all the things about what I teach about that. So took this dog outside, got the first location, recognized it, went to the second location, dog was on it instantly. Third location, I didn't even get to it because the dog dragged me across the parking lot to the fifth location that I'd put, and it was upwind, and it knew it exactly. So took me right to that, and I went, wow. So the owner was coming to pick up the dog in about like 15, 20 minutes later. So I said, let's keep this dog out. I want to show this owner. So showed him, and he goes, that's amazing. I said, this dog actually needs to do scent work. That's its motivation. He goes, yeah, I didn't know what to do with her. And she was a machine on that. She loved that. So sometimes you just find out what that dog is, even when they're 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with working with a dog like that. It's like the way I describe it is, if you find that, the Australian soccer player who's never played American football, but he comes over to college and he can kick field goals from 70 yards out.
Mm-hmm.
You don't say, well, you've never played football before. You use him for that purpose because he doesn't have to run, he doesn't have to tackle, he doesn't have to do anything except kick that football through the field goal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if a dog already has that, that's great. But you're not going to take you're not going to take the wimpy kid in high school that, may weigh 300 pounds because all he does is eat and sit and study. And you're not going to make him into a college football player.
Mm-hmm.
Just that's not his
Yeah.
motivation. That's not what he's doing. And I don't
Yeah.
mean anything by that, but that's just an example.
Mm-hmm.
So um, all dogs have the same or very similar capabilities, and they're all canines. They all think like predator canines. They each breed has its own, select predilections and character personalities. You have the ancient breeds that, a husky is gonna pull, and that's what you want it to do. It hunts, it pulls. That's what they've done 35,000 years. So, using a dog in the ones that we have especially bred specifically for the type of jobs that we're looking for out of them, that's already their mentality, that's already their drive. So it's a lot easier to, use a particular line, say, of German Shepherd or a particular line of, Labrador or, whatever else to be a certain kind of dog.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that answers your question either.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
It's the it depends answer,
I see.
and,
As
and
always.
you yes, because there's no telling whether that dog can you force and crush that dog into a job? Yes, but it may not be, trainers talk about fulfilling the dogs. Well, just because it has a job doesn't mean it really likes it. It's not living its best life. That's what I want to find is a dog that lives its best life and find out how to create that home life for it, not just the
Mhm.
job.
Yeah.
Because that's important. Because most of the time it's going to be the home life. They're not going to be out there working, right? They're going to be working in the home. Bosch, for instance, is in a way, because he's medical alert, he's always working. He's sniffing, he smells things. He alerted on my daughter 30 minutes before she collapsed, bleeding internally and would have died if he hadn't done that. Because she went into surgery immediately once she got into the hospital. So,
Well,
he's, so in effect, some aspects they're always working because that's their universe is the scent, the smell.
mhm.
But if I'm on the couch and, my back isn't killing me and I get up, he doesn't have to help me up, you know. If I'm walking down the stairs and I've got the guardrail there, he doesn't need to stabilize me if my back or my knee gives out.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, dogs and humans, that's a good point though. Dogs and humans, we've been together for 35, 40,000 years, somewhere in there that we have evidence of. That's about the timeline that genetics changed, etc. And so even giving up a percentage of brain matter for dogs and for humans of neural capacity was because one species filled the need of the other species to have that capability and was better at it. So in nature and entropy of energy, to survive better, since the brain takes 20% of the energy of the entire body, if you diminish the brain size, you're more capable of surviving in lean times because you don't need quite as much food, energy, et cetera, because something else is helping you doing that. They're more effective at that. It's the way that we use tools. That's what humans do too. So the dog used us as a tool in certain ways to survive better. And that's kind of, that's what's gone on. And then our breeding of dogs to make smaller and larger dogs. We have a brain capacity difference in dogs of 2.5 times, depending on the breed. Size difference, capacity, volumetric capacity. So that's a massive difference in one single species like that. But it's because we were capable of doing that and they were capable of surviving because we added the part that they didn't need anymore to be able to survive with that smaller capacity brain. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So when when you're working with a dog that's supposed to end up being your service animal, let's say, if you over rely on them constantly, then you actually give up some of your capabilities, some of your mentality. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to put it all on the dog. And I see some people give up their responsibility for themselves to that service animal. So they overutilize that dog.
Yeah.
That's not good for the dog because it's not good for the human.
So would you say if a dog is overused, so to speak, that the dog is losing the joy of doing it? Like alerting or something? So?
Maybe not.
Okay.
Maybe not. But it's that I'm not sure that every species, but I think humans tend to want it easier. We want the next model year of car with more luxury and more conveniences always.
Yeah.
So our tendency is to want it easier on ourselves. We think that's survival, when in fact it's probably against survival, because we lose our capabilities. So fight going into the night, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Well, from the medical side of things, people that kind of just fade away and give up, they die.
Can I use that as a segue into roles within the pack? Because I sent in a question. I was really interested in the different roles of the individuals within the pack. And I wasn't quite sure what you meant by strategic placement.
Okay. So Sharon, you've had plenty of dogs over the years, and what are the capacities and capabilities, the different things and the different personalities of dogs that you've seen? Because they're sometimes vastly different between dogs, aren't they?
Very much so, yes.
Okay. So what you are looking for, the type of pack that you wish to create? What is it there? You sense gaps in what could fill in an area that would benefit the pack, the stability of the pack, the capabilities, their happiness, their fulfillment. Your situation, it's not all from a human standpoint, it's, from the dogs. And that's what you're looking for. So as far as specific roles, the types of dogs that I've looked for, the reason I give for instance, the story of Callie is also the story of Toffee. I was not looking for Toffee at the time. I was looking for a dog, specific type of dog. In both cases, I changed my mind once I met those dogs, because they had an area, an intelligence, a capability beyond what my plan was. And that's where you always make a plan, but then, like the old saying, your battle plan's always perfect until you meet the enemy. So
when you met Toffee, what was it that made you think that she would be a good addition to your pack? What was it about her specifically?
Wow, that I reiterate, she is the smartest, most intelligent, most capable dog I have ever met, ever. There was no doubt in my mind instantly how smart she was, and how it was like that kid that the first time they ever see a book and they voraciously read it, and they want the next book, and they want the next thing, and it's just, yeah, what's next? What's next? So the engagement, her instant engagement, her capability within 15 minutes, she'd never been on a leash. She was a feral dog. She was 5.5 months old, and people think, well, okay, then they're beyond what, I would even start working with. That girl was starving for the engagement, it's like her brain was just a sponge wanting to suck everything in and learn it all. And she has this, it's almost like she's inside my mind. I can think it and she's already doing it. I don't even have, I just look, she looks at me and goes, does it? I'm going, God, still, she is, I don't know what it is about her, and instantly, just the way we connected, because she was there with Barb and Gail for, I think, a couple of months, maybe a month and a half or so, and before I came over to meet her, and they didn't know what to do with her really, because she was so smart, and I think all the other dogs were already spoken for, and so Barb was at one point, she was Dallas police officer, and she was appointed head of Dallas Animal Control, Dallas Animal Services, which is a massive network and facility there with hundreds of dogs in it constantly. And she worked with German Shepherds and Malinois for decades. And so she saw hundreds of dogs come in there. She was sent in to clean that whole operation up. So she retired from that, and I believe she became, they asked her to be the head of Dallas SPCA. And then after she retired from that, she and SPCA, well, she got SPCA there, the local SPCA, to have a deal basically with Dallas Animal Services to kind of the dogs that were going to get put down to get over to them to be able to work with and then get adopted out. Well, her line of things was German Shepherds and getting them over to Good Shepherd Rescue, who was really excellent people, been around for decades too. And so when they described Toffee as scary smart, they knew what they were talking about. That was their impression of her before I ever met her. And I said, well, that sounds interesting. That's not the kind of dog I'm looking for. But anyway, so I went over and saw her. And virtually instantly, the second I met her, we started engaging. And she was like, yeah, you're the one, buddy.
So how does that fit with the rest of the dogs in your pack? I understand how you would find that as, very attractive and something you'd like to work with, but what about the other dogs?
So her willingness, her engagement, she could have become within her range of capability, of her personality, of she could have been spirited off to some household thing and been a holy terror because she's so smart. But because I could see her capabilities and how smart she was, just asking her, in 15 minutes, we had a perfect understanding of what I was asking of her. Leash, jump over into that box, have a seat, come over here, do this, do that. Instantly. She'd never been trained, never worked before, and everything was perfect, absolutely perfect. And I was just blown away. And so were they. They were taking photos and videos. They noticed it was an instant connection between us. It was like we read each other's minds. So I knew she would be able to be willing, first of all, to take my direction as far as what role I wanted her to play. And so her purpose actually rounded out the pack because she was so smart, willing, and she was so pro-social with me. I knew she could become that with other dogs, and she proved it when I took Bella over and others. And the second she met Bosch, she instantly was mother to him, and everything I asked of Bosch to do, Toffee would come over, look at me, look at him, do it, and show him exactly what to do. So in fact, I didn't train Bosch, she did. That's what I saw in her willingness to be absolutely pro-social with humans and dogs.
Okay, thank you.
There's some nebulous feel about what a dog can do. You get a sense of them, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes I'm picking a dog for a certain purpose. I was actually looking for a dog to do search and rescue. And a year before, I had some people in Ohio that were wanting to get this particular female Tervuren to me. And that's what I was interested in. She's beautiful, beautiful dog, incredible, great breeding. They were breeders. Through a friend of mine that I've known for years. And it just didn't work out timing wise because I was wanting to kind of replace the hole that Mia was kind of on the downside there with DM. So I was wanting to replace the hole there in that whole thing and continue with search and rescue. So that's what I was looking for. But when Toffee came along, I thought, God, this girl would be absolutely great at anything that I asked of her, and she would. She would do anything. She'd go to her death doing anything I asked for her. And turned out that her job was different. It was for the benefit of the pack. So, and and by that time, my knee was getting worse, and I knew I wasn't going to be spending, 16-hour days out in the woods looking for, signs of life or anything. So sometimes the right dog just comes along, and you there's so many, here's the way I would put it. There are so many personalities, so many different types of dogs and motivations. It's not necessarily the gap, but will that fit in with your pack? And then how will it benefit the pack? That's really the way you ought to look at it.
Right.
So some are service level, working level, some are just great, happy dogs. Others are serious, but they're serious about just maintaining composure. Captain was that way. Captain was he was my greeter because nothing ever bothered him. There wasn't a dog that came in that as soon as they met him, all of their fears, anxiety, reactivity, they just melted away because he was just like, and he'd walk off, just walk past them, and they'd go, oh, okay, I guess everything's okay here. And then I'd bring in Portia, and then I'd bring in the rest of them, and they got inundated with 15 dogs. But Captain was the one that I used because he could set the tone of, yep, this is who we are, this is what we do. And we looked at this monkey up here to let us know what to do. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that does. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, I could go through, a list of probably, all these different characteristics and say, here's all these hundreds of different types of dogs, and you pick one from column A and one from column B, but that's, and that's kind of what you do in your mind. And then that dog comes along and you go, no, that's, I had a plan, but that battle plan just went out the door.
Yeah.
So,
I recognize that.
yeah. Well, I hope that answers that question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay. I'm so I hadn't looked at these questions prior to, okay, so communications in relationship to space and agreement, disagreements about use of space. Okay, so how do they communicate where they arrange themselves, and how do they communicate when they are placed in a location? Okay. Please include examples of what behaviors are evidence of those kinds of communications about space in particular. Okay. So.
That sounds like an essay question on an exam.
That sounds like a
please provide examples.
like prove it to me. That's the way I read it. Okay, so here's how that could be a 3-hour answer. Dogs have already figured out, even in microseconds, if they've never met before, where to place themselves in relationship to other dogs and to humans and objects, because they've already practiced everything in their mind as to what is the answer to survival. And when they don't place themselves correctly, or they become anxious, have anxiety, reactivity, et cetera, is because they really haven't practiced that encounter. In other words, they don't have the information in the brain to say, this is how I survive this situation best. So you go back to the basics on that And we say, okay, so how does this dog, why did that dog place itself there? Because it's found that that is the best way to indicate to everybody else that I'm not a threat, I don't want conflict, that I'm part of the group. I want to be part of the group, and then you find the antisocial, asocial, social, and prosocial animals that way. Doesn't just automatically happen in conflict, unless, of course, there are two separate packs of competing predatory aspects for territory, and then that's a different. Then that's a tactical question rather than cooperative placement. So they've already practiced in their mind. The whole point of life in a brain is to gain experience. What does experience mean? Well, experience means that it's something that has occurred, and that particular brain, that animal, whatever it is, has survived that. And then it analyzes, how did I survive it? And space obviously is one of the main things, the distance, the speed, the objects around, the fixed objects versus the movable objects versus the animals versus, the weather at the time of day or night. All of those things factor into the answer. Why did I survive that? And then you encounter another thing and another and another and thousands of things constantly, daily, every day of the life. And that's what the brain is programmed to figure out how to survive. And that's not just food, water, and shelter. It's literally where do you place yourself within every single environment to better survive. And then communication, the signals, the languages are there, created and understood by others, especially of your own species, sometimes of other species. And the obvious ones are predator-prey aspects that are understood between species too. Virtually all of animals understand the predator-prey aspect. And remember, prey can turn into predator as predatory action, I will say, to defend itself, to defend its progeny, to all of those things. So make sure you see placement in context of that. Meaning, even the wimpy little dog that likes to go in the corner sometimes will stand up and go, no, I'm not having that. And so it can become very dominant in a very select instant of time. But all and for a normal brain, I'll put it that way, not a practice brain, not a miswired brain. For a normal brain, conflict is to be avoided as much as possible, because conflict creates situations that you can be injured, maimed, or killed outright. And so signals, capabilities, placement, physical aspects of capability, speed, strength, wits, all of that stuff. That's how placement happens. So it's all practiced. Now, once it gets into a pack that has a familiarity, a comfort level of, okay, you do this, I do that, and that's how we've learned where our quote unquote our places are. And that can be that's a comfort in itself, but then it's also a detriment for survival. Why? Because sometimes that dog has to go over to the other location and see, is this a better location for me for survival? Does this have an advantage? why is this dog over here and I'm over there? And so sometimes they do change places. And to avoid conflict, the other dog goes, okay, proximity has meaning. The one who's there first or the one who's closest to owns it. And, within a normal, natural situation of a social unit, you're not going to go over and beat up your pack member. Those are abnormal and abnormal situations that are created, frankly, because of control and misunderstanding by another species, us. Unnatural packs are rare, and they don't last very long because there is conflict in it, and so they either break apart or get thrown out or attack each other. Then that's really not a stable pack, is it? So looking at nature. Now, the dogs that humans have don't have much of a choice as to who's in their pack. And that's where we got a lot of trainers get a lot of work because, people are poor at picking personalities, types, behaviors, et cetera, et cetera. They look at looks. Well, I want a little dog that looks cute. Well, that's not a really good reason to have that particular dog. As a matter of fact, it probably causes more problems than most humans could ever imagine. Because it's not like going and picking out that particular toy off the shelf that's just like 1,000 other toys that were produced. It's an individual with intelligence that makes its own decisions. So that's really the question: is who is in that pack, and why did they select that position? A lot of it is based upon how they see an advantage for themselves. Okay. Yes, it's pro-social in a lot of cases, in most cases, but still. So the dog that always lays near the human, what do you think about that? And the other one lays further away. So there's already been an agreement that that dog is, by being closer to, in a way, owns that human and that space around that human, unless it's really balanced and both dogs can be there without ever having any conflict. Okay. And that's the type of pack that you want to create. And that's what happens with mine. If, for instance, like Candy, the puppy, if I go over to one of my dogs, of course, as a puppy, she wants to survive and wants to be there. She's learning from being pushy and rude. She's learning to not be pushy and rude because I'm going to ignore her and keep her from getting in between me and the dog that I'm working with. She gets ignored once that happens, and then she goes away. So she learns from that as a puppy. But puppies automatically want to go where the main character, resource provider is, because that's their survival in all of that. So they want to be around when the leader, whoever that is, whether dog or human, moves, that puppy wants to be with them. That's a good time to, once again, as I'm working with Candy, for instance, that's a great time to work on the recall aspect, is that natural tendency to want to be around who protects you. The big bad dude that's going to protect you, that provides food, that all of that stuff. So you already capture these behaviors by knowing that's a natural tendencies of dogs at certain ages, and you cement that in the brain. That's their experience. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, of the practicing in the brain of what happens when a dog places itself a certain place. As a mature adult, then it's going to do so also based on age. Puppies want to be right here and in your face and be rude and all that stuff because they don't know any better. Once they get more self-aware, confident, et cetera, and see the rest of the universe, then they start placing themselves. As they age, they go further away into that corner and don't want to be bothered because they may ache a little bit or whatever else. I know how that feels. So that tends to change with age too. So I hope that answers that question on both sides of things of, you know, the what, where, and why do they change? And so not sure if I answered it or not. I hope I did in some way. So how does laying scent within the space of the pack influence the pack? That's an interesting question. Depends on what the scent is because what your purpose is. Obviously, if you are placing scent there for purpose or for the pack to pick it up on their own, either way, that by itself can be a mental stimulus for the pack. If it's the same thing over and over again, generally, scent changes all the time. The time of year, the particular rain, and the ozone in the air from from lightning, all of those things that come through with the rain that come down into the soil and all around changes the scent of the entire place. So they're getting knowledge, information, and constant change to learn from in scent itself. But if you're laying scent within that pack territory or extraterritorial jurisdiction that they're used to, then those are stimuli that you can utilize correctly to help gain relevance with your pack. You can point them out, you can support them, you can be happy for them for finding it, all that stuff. And then, they think you're in their world, which is a great way to do it and a great way to have that connection. You become relevant. So I hope that answers that a bit. What is being communicated when they each have their own usual place and then randomly swap spaces? Okay, well, I think I explained that where they have to. They're always testing, they're always experimenting. Some breeds are more testing and more experimental. Huskies are definitely more testing all the time because it's all about survival to them because of that ancient breed mind. They're basically, they're that close to being a wolf that loves people. So two of my dogs do that a lot, but the other one rarely does. And the usual reason has to do with an obstacle in the way of her own usual space. Why the distinct differences? What is being communicated? Okay, the two that are going back and forth are experimenting. Don't know what the age of the other one is, but as I mentioned, age changes things because you don't want to be bothered. When you were 18 years old, you may have wanted to party all the time. Okay, when you're 40, busy and don't want to be bothered with stupid things like partying. Okay, so that's kind of what happens in the development of a dog. So age may be a factor. I don't know. Depends on the age of those particular dogs. It may be that then the two that change places, they could be the older ones and they're seeking comfort. By comfort isn't necessarily how we think of it, but it could be proximity to something that they feel safer with, more willing to be around it. They may need that mental change. There's all sorts of factors involved. So think about it once again in terms of experimentation, of testing, of survival, and how they see it, particularly. Okay. So I hope that at least gets you thinking about that in some way. Okay. My dog has a very strong scent and clearly makes sure she gets it all over the territory. Okay. I was quietly listening to see if I could feel why she does that. The answer I got is that it makes her feel safe, like she likes her own scent and gives her a feeling of this in my space, my territory, and it also is inclusive of the pack. It says we are together here, and maybe it's her way to watch out for everybody. I feel like it was pro-social, but her scent is very strong. Probably all of them do that, but her scent is stronger and it seems more deliberate. Okay. So first of all, I got to wonder what's different about the dog. Either um, there may be particular hormones, or maybe an immune system that has something that's going on with it that the body processes if you're feeding the same thing. Might need to find something different to feed that particular dog, because just like humans, not everybody is comfortable eating the same thing. And because our genetics are random, we're all humans, but well, most of us, but but we all process food differently, and sometimes some foods are materially used differently, and our bodies can't. Some people are lactose intolerant, some people, celiac disease. There's all sorts of things that happen with humans that cause actually allergic reactions, feeling full, the bloating, the urination smell. There's all sorts of things that happen with humans. So could be that the strength of that smell, that odor, may be partially doing with the actual diet of that particular dog. And because certain dogs, I've had to change their diet specifically for them, that does not include what I do with my other dogs. So you might experiment around a little bit of that. Now, as far as the territorial marking, I think you've read it pretty well, actually. Marking, for instance, I mentioned earlier in this, having Candy meet Carol's dog for the first time this morning. Carol's dog, so meeting this puppy who was hackles up and barking and all that stuff, and her, turning her head away and doing all the signals, it wasn't quite working. So she went over and she actually pooped, and then she peed 3 different points. So once Candy wasn't willing to go up to her backside to sniff her until she pooped. And then the poop was there. She sniffed it. She went up to her back as she was walking away and was sniffing there. And then that dog, I'm not even going to say the name because it's hilarious. But anyway, so then she urinated. Candy goes over, sniffs, gets more relaxed. And by the 3rd point, then they were kind of together and they walked together. So their dog did an excellent, perfect thing of, this is who I am. And she wasn't ignoring, she was saying, look, I'm not a threat. I'm showing you how to behave with me. You're a puppy. I see that. I'm giving you a puppy pass. And I'm showing you I'm not a threat. You can join me and trust me. And so once you got the scent, and there wasn't. So let's talk about what that scent tells a puppy. First of all, it's a dog. Second of all, that the chemicals inside the dog, was there any adrenaline? Was there any other things that puppy could pick up, that Kenny could pick up? And so the scent itself calmed the puppy. First of all, that's their universe, and the brain is structured to know what scent is. Thirdly, then, it was everything is okay. Let me show you by who I am, what I am, and that I'm not fearful, I'm not aggressive, I'm not coming at you, you're not, I don't see you as a threat. All of that information was in those scent marks, and that's probably what that dog is doing, honestly. So as a pro-social act, yes, that's kind of what she do. Okay. I hope that helps answer some of the things, at least get you thinking about it. Okay. What does Nelson say to people who declare there is no such thing as pack? How about politely bunk? It's a ridiculous new age thing, just like the memes that go around about that particular pack of wolves in northern Alberta, Canada, that trailing through the snow, that there's like 43 of them, and they show, oh, the old one is at the front. No, the old one isn't going to break trail, they'd kill it. That's so stupid. It's like, oh, the leaders are back at the back protecting everybody, and no, actually, I know that pack. The breeding female was in front, so the alpha pair, if you will, was the front breaking trail at that moment of that particular. That was an oversight by the wildlife people, and the helicopter was a photograph taken from that. So when they were tracking them, because that's one of the largest packs out there. Obviously, the territory's large and very, I'll say, wealthy, and elk and other things that a pack that size can exist. That doesn't happen in more arid or warmer climates. It just doesn't happen. It all happens up north. So, wolves are generally northern climate. That's where they came from, but they have adapted to other climates. So, this recently I've been hearing more of this idea that dogs don't form pack, but instead form fission fusion. Oh dear God. More new age word salad. That's what I'd call it. It's trying to change definitions to influence human thought and behavior. This thing. Of course, it's a pack. What is the problem with using the word pack? I've said dogs, wolves, canines are social animals. Their idea of a social unit is different from species to species and breed to breed. A Mexican wolf pack is not large. It's a family unit, fairly small. A northern gray wolf, like the one in northern Alberta that everybody saw the photo of, and there's BS going around about that. And still, years later, after I've tried to debunk it about 1 million times, I've just given up because those stupid ideas continue around. So those wolves not only accept, but need that size of pack. An ovcharka is not going to accept other dogs in its territory, regardless of what you do with it. That's not their idea of what they're existing for. They may accept 1 or 2 or 3 other dogs if they were there when that dog was born and was a puppy up to about 4 months of age. And they won't accept anybody else as part of their pack. Generally, it takes a lot of work to get that to happen. I've worked with three different clients that had older ovcharka puppies that we had to integrate them in with other dogs. So what did they do? Well, they went after the neighborhood dogs instead. So because that's what they do. But then again, you got different breeds of dogs that are used to very large social groups, which humans labeled as a pack or a herd or a gaggle or a flock. Whatever that human word was, it happens to be a word. That's all it is, but it's describing particular animals that you know, we have to have different words to describe that are modifiers to that particular breed of, or species of animal. And that's all that is. It's a word. Okay, so what? What you're doing is you're describing a social animal that creates social groups either on its own accord or with us. A dog is a social animal. Otherwise, it couldn't live with cats, birds, and humans in the same household. That's what it is. Okay. So as far as the word salad and trying to redefine words and all that stuff, that seems to be this modern thing going on for the past 30 years. And it's basically confusing people and trying to make a name or a place for yourself and divide, which is ridiculous. Okay. So that's what I have to say about that. And that's the mild part. Okay. Could you expand on roles within okay, this is Pack Dynamics Zoom. You talked about strategic placements when selecting a dog. Okay, so I think I answered that one.
Yeah, that was my question.
Okay, at least partially answered. Sorry. So, okay. So what if Sharon, so since you're on, I don't know how long you've been in the subscription thing and how many things you've watched, but
Since you started it. So
oh,
I've
okay,
seen
well,
all of them.
oh, thank you. Well, then you're a good person to talk to. Has it made sense to you? Has it helped?
It has helped. I looking back on it, I found the first few, I wasn't really getting a whole lot out of the first few. And I think it was just, I wasn't really getting into the rhythm of how you present things. And then once I got into the rhythm of it, then it all began to come together for me. And
Okay.
it absolutely helps. I just, I there's so much. I go back and I reread my notes, and I just keep adding things to the classes that I teach. I just think, oh yeah, I've got to tell them that. Oh, I've got to show them that. Yeah. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming
it is.
because, imagine from my side picking well, I need to cover that because, we barely touch on it in all these classes that I already teach. So I've got to cover that and show this matters this much, not just that much that we have the time to talk about it. So, and there's thousands of those things that I could, if I lived to be 1,000, it could be that every month.
Yeah.
So, from my side, what do I teach? What do I pick out to try to share? And so this whole series of things has been an opportunity to take that one point and go, people need to understand this to a better depth of things, how important this one little tiny variable is to everything else and how it relates. And that's really how I tried to set it up.
Right.
Sometimes there's a 1 month standalone. Other times there's, a series of 3 months where it goes from this to this to this, and then we change. They're all related, but so anyway. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it greatly. Lisa, I'm gonna knock on your blank window there. See if you'll engage.
Yeah, I'm here doing my dishes and listening.
Okay. So
Yeah.
So what have you gotten out of all of these things? Is this helping?
Yes, and I've been from the start, and I took Remy through 2 RBBM1s. So I can't even, it's just everything. Like it changed the whole way, first of all, how I see what a dog is, right? And that was key because then that helped me also see what I am because it was pretty, and then how to connect, how to bridge that gap, and really think from her perspective more and more, just so much thinking from her perspective and then getting that feedback back from her doing that.
Yes.
I mean, it's been huge, invaluable. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So
Because
I
that's
use
my
things
purpose.
daily from the courses. I mean, it's just an integrated part of us as a pack. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Excellent. That's why I do this, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well,
Thank
thank you.
you.
No,
Yeah.
thank you. Appreciate it. It's yeah. It's not easy picking the right specific subject, that tiny little thing that we need to cover to get people to think about and hopefully incorporate like you've done, Lisa. So, Candace, I'll knock on your blank window and ask you to jump in here. If you can unmute. Well, or it's okay, you don't have to. Or if you're even there, you may just be watching as you can. And what about you, Rachel? We'll come back to Candace if she can join us. What about you, Rachel? Are you?
Oh, no.
There you go. There you go. Okay.
Here I am. Yeah,
Yeah.
all these classes are kind of helping me to focus on one aspect in the whole thing. Um, Also, sometimes it clarifies certain thing for myself and how I can bring it up to the clients, because you explain things a little bit differently or in a different context. So this helps. It helps to be focused on one thing, and then now it feels like I have a lot of sheets in front of me and I can pull them up.
Well,
Kind of thing.
yeah. Well, just incorporate them in your brain. You don't need the sheets.
Yeah, I know. I mean, in my brain, I have sheets.
I got going through the Rolodex in your brain.
Yes. I would, and then the wind comes.
Yeah. Mine are so worn I can't even move them anymore. All right, guys. Well,
Yeah.
I figured this would last about an hour, hour and a half. Usually does. So I appreciate you. I hope the people who watch this later, I hope they gain some information out of this. But I want to, about every 3 or 4 months, I want to provide this Q&A opportunity for people that have some question, because we really don't have I don't have time to answer that many questions in the normal, monthly. So, okay. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate all of you. See you, God willing, and the creek don't rise, as they say.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Yes.
Nelson.
thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Happy Sunday to
Bye.
everybody.
You too.
Hi, Rachel.
Bye. Bye,
Bye.
Sharon.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Bye, Lisa.